Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. As we continue our journey through principles of brand management, the next section is concerned with looking at the characteristics of successful brands, very much from a tactical perspective. In other words, if we do some of these things, then we stand a good likelihood that our brand should succeed in the marketplace. I'm going to use just one slide with lots of examples to bring the points to life. And the slide draws significantly on the research that was done by Professor Kevin Lane Keller at Dartmouth in the States. Looking at the characteristics of strong brands, those brands that succeed in the marketplace, what do we see? Well, we see them doing certain things very well indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, have any of you seen a Rolls-Royce that has broken down by the side of the road? I'll leave you to think. The lack of response may indicate my point. And the point is that brands that are successful brands, they get on the brand triangle, they get the functional values sorted out, and by golly gosh, do they make sure that the brand really thrives there. Ladies and gentlemen, I think of the case study of when Volkswagen bought Skoda. At the time, Skoda was a brand that had got a lot of passion behind it. This was a brand that at the turn of the century was such that princes and princesses in Central and Eastern Europe were being driven around by it. The Second World War came, the problems of destruction occurred, they became part of the Soviet bloc, central planning took place, and unfortunately Skoda saw a reduction, significant reduction, in the investment that the organisation should have been having to keep the brand going. In theory, it should have died. It never did, because there was a passion inside the organisation. These were engineers who really believed in what this car stood for, and they kept on doing things to make sure that it was able to operate. When VW bought it, VW, as part of its expansion program, just as it had gone and bought Seat, VW had a choice, and the choice was, do you rebrand as VW, or do you leave it as Skoda? All sorts of issues were going on in there. And some of the journalists at the time were saying, well, they wouldn't rebrand it, would they? Because VW stands for a certain level of quality, which unfortunately at the time the Skoda didn't have. But what the journalists forgot to recognize was VW was also committed to letting that flame that had been kept alive, to let that flame really become a big fire. They let that engineering passion continue with investment. And what we now see is, if you look at the price point of the Skoda, its pricing level has significantly gone up. Because again, first and foremost, it's got to be functionally good. So these brands come along, and the first thing they do is they understand the functional benefit, they start to look at the values that are going to reinforce it, they then put systems and investment in place to maintain this level of functional excellence on an attribute that is important to the customer. But as we keep on saying, there's more to a brand than just functionalism. The second characteristic, said Professor Kevin Lane Keller, as he was looking at brand success, relates to this issue of staying relevant. Brands succeed when they really understand what they stand for, and then they remain relevant to that point. Ladies and gentlemen, think about it. Gillette as a brand that's been around for many years. This brand, in terms of the razor, in terms of the disposable head, is all about not shaving. It is about a celebration of manhood. The brand, though, lost sight of this. Along came Bic. Bic with its disposable razors, Bic because it was very much into plastic moulding and disposability. Made sense for Bic, but the Bic brand was very much a brand that was positioned for women. Now what was going on was, young ladies were buying Bic razors for their boyfriends, finding it rather unpleasant to be kissed by this very stubbly creature. so Gillette sees it and thinks, gosh, what a jolly good opportunity. Let's likewise get into the disposable razors area. But in so doing, though, what Gillette had forgotten was the importance of staying relevant. Relevant to man because it was father-son bonding. It was about the father celebrating manhood initially. It wasn't about learning the art of shaving through a girlfriend. Brand didn't do too well. Gillette pulled out of the disposable market, went back to what the brand was all about, and we see the success of Gillette today. Successful brands recognize that at the end of the day, branding gives you the opportunity to increase the value of your shares if you're a public company, because stakeholders recognize that there is something very, very good here. Now, if there is something very good here, then what you don't do is you don't price your brand based upon some of the techniques like cost plus. In other words, you understand your cost base and then you put some margin onto it. Instead, you take a different view, and the view is brands are consumed by my customers or by my consumers. They perceive, or from an engineering perspective, they evaluate value. Because they're about value, I will therefore price on a value basis. The easiest thing that Toyota could have done when it had Lexus was then again to start to look inside and think in terms of pricing based upon cost plus. What it did was it recognized that it was going to benchmark itself not against the upper end of the Toyota range, but instead against Mercedes. By doing that, they were therefore into a different price bracket. And it was all about recognizing that this brand is about value. And therefore the price point needs to reflect it. If you've got something good there, there is no need to feel embarrassed about having a charge for it that reflects that. Successful brands thrive, said Professor Kevin Lane Keller, because what they've been doing is they have cut through the noise in the marketplace, and they are well positioned. People know what they stand for. They know what they stand for. So as I said earlier on, when thinking about my brand triangle, my functional, my emotional, and then the experience that comes through from it. Now, organisations like Volvo, they stand for safety. They're very well positioned. They've cut through all the noise out there in the marketplace. If you're going to thrive with brands, another characteristic that was found to be related to success with brands was about the importance of consistency. Now, eBay is all about transparency. It's taken a totally different view of the football field in terms of the way that somebody is playing against another team. In other words, a buyer against a seller, where in theory there are certain things that are hidden. This is all about transparency. You're not sure about the quality of the seller. This is all about transparency. So on eBay, the extent to which you're a good seller, you're honest, you're truthful in terms of what you're doing, you get rated. eBay takes this concept of transparency, and it's been consistent in terms of what it's been doing with its brand, and hence we start to see the reason for, well, one of the reasons for its brand success. Look at the visual there. Look at the opening page on eBay. It's all about simplicity. You look at the web, the home page of many brands out there, even those that are still about, and some of them I keep on wondering, gosh, what's going on? Because there's so much, they're trying to be overly helpful. And in being overly helpful, you're then losing some of the clarity because there's far too much there. But it's fascinating, as you rightly say, here's a brand that's, it's a newcomer to the market, and yet it's a newcomer to the market that because of its big idea, and then the way it enacted transparency, it's been consistent in terms of what it's doing. These are some of the reasons for, I would argue, its success.